And let me give you an example, right? Because everybody thinks that I'm just making up who these families are. Their genealogies are curated by professional genealogists. Professional genealogists go back in history and they start reading who the dynasties are for Rome, for Persia, and then they piece together their families. And if you go from one genealogist's works, which is completely unrelated to another genealogist in another specific academic silo, like a fucking Roman history in the fucking pre-empire era versus somebody that's studying Greece in the 1000s, right? They have a whole different fucking historical background. They're not talking to each other, and oftentimes their works are fucking 50 years apart. What we can do now, and what I've done for this last 2 years, is start connecting genealogies to this institutional information, okay? Now, what you can see, like I showed you, and it's the most important part of all of human history that I don't understand why nobody ever fucking talks about. The Assyrian Confederation in Mesopotamia. You understand what I'm talking about? They had a confederation of Chaldeans, who I told you are Chaldeans with a Kaldeens, or Chaldeans, right? We're calling them the Chaldees and Chaldeans. They're Kasdim in Hebrew. They're fucking Chaldee in other forms. You understand? So they had Canaanites, Phoenicians, Hebrews, Greeks, Medes, Arabs. Fucking everybody was in this confederation with 16 different nations. Then when the Persians take over, who are descendants and intermarry with those Assyrian kings, when they take over, they have 22 nations going from India to Greece. So people don't understand that if you keep following these lines and you start looking at all these separate genealogy pages, you can tie together yourself the entire network of who these religious families are, who the government dynasties are, who the monarchs are, and you can tie all that together yourself. What they're not going to do themselves, these fucking Rothschilds and Rockefellers and Kallinomises, they're not going to tell you themselves. They're not going to be like, yeah, they might brag about it in a very fucking generalistic way and be like, we're the sons of David. That's it. That's all they'll say. They're not going to show you the proof to that, because showing you the proof to that gives you every right to go kill these fucking people, prosecute them, and take trillions of dollars in wealth. Every right as free tax slaves in the planet. We all have the right to go get those things for what they've done to us for thousands of years. The manipulation, the funding of both sides of wars, the constant displacement of our people everywhere. White people, black people, Asians. By a handful of networks that come from that Assyrian, Persian Confederation. And I don't give a fuck what these Indians and Chinese people say. They have no fucking idea, because they're in their own version of propaganda like we are here in the United States, where we think that there's some kind of independent development going on where China was fucking isolated and not related to this shit. No. They were infiltrated by Persians and Jews. They married Persians and Jews, and those Persians and Jews are the middleman between them and Arabia. The Arabian royal families intersect with the Assyrian fucking royal families in the year 700 BC. Queen Shamsi is like the queen of the sun gods, right? Shamsi is the feminine form, like Baal and Bala, right? Or Bali and Bala, or Balat, right? There's a female god version and there's a male god version. And then besides just god versions, these are also priesthoods, or these are also names like the Lord or a lady of a fucking society, right? There's different iterations and different eras. That's why you know none of this shit is really mystical whatsoever. But let's get back to the point. Queen Shamsi, you follow her line down, leads to a Arabian royal family. So first Assyrian used Arabs as vassals. Queen Shamsi is that interlink in 700 BC, right? So her descendants go down and are running Arabia till 200 BC, when later on, Rome invites them up to be collectors for, they have things like exilarchs, phylarchs, archons, people that are tax collectors for regions that are more closely related to the people in those regions. So they're like an extracting middleman for Rome, okay? So they hired, eventually under Pompey and Julius Caesar and Crassus in the first triumvirate of Rome, they hired the Arabian royal family from Semiramis and Iamblichus. They brung those families up to Emesa to start Emesa, Syria, right? And to run different Syrian areas. Those families controlled the Kaaba stone before Islam. They controlled it after Islam. They also control the black canonical stone of Elagabalus in Syria, which is part of Roman Syria. So I mean, it's within the Roman boundaries, and Rome is also worshiping these gods for 7 years in Rome, Elagabalus. But Rome was also having Sybil, who's a black stone god, right? Goddess, and in all these, they circumnavigate. They circle the black stone, and they worship it. They prostrate to it. They kiss it. That thing was happening from Turkey to Iraq, all the way as far as the Chinese border with the Bactrians and the Sogdians and the Barmakid families that eventually marry into the Caliph families of the Abbasid Empire, and they have the whole Abbasid Revolution. When that Abbasid Revolution happens, they make the treaty with the Carolingians. The Carolingians, people are more mobile than you can ever imagine at this time. In a few weeks, they can get anywhere down these roads with chariots, with horses. You understand? So... and when they have unlimited wealth, distance has never been a problem for people with unlimited wealth, unless you're talking about maritime travel, okay? Because that's always been dangerous. But they've even had better maritime capabilities than we ever talk about now. So let's go back. Queen Shamsi leads to Samsi-Garamas. Samsi-Garamas starts the Emesa dynasty. The Emesa dynasty is who brung Elgabalus and eventually intermarried with the Roman elite, right? Severinus, who was a North African, potentially half Arabian Roman emperor himself, marries half Arabian Syrian Julia Domna, and that's when the Emesa family was marrying the Armenian families. So you have the Arab royal families marrying up north, the Armenian families meeting in the middle in Syria, and Syria's always been a major home of the Davidic Exilarch families and the Diane families from 1000 BC to today. They track themselves, okay, from the Bronze Age collapse till today in Syria. Canaan, right? Okay, and some of the fucking Hebrews that settled in the original First Temple period, some of them went north. We know that. Asher and Dan. Asher like Assyria. You understand? There's evolutions to these. Look, let's get back to the point. Severinus marries Julia Domna. So we have a half Arabian chick that's running Rome. Her sister marries other elites in the Roman Empire. And then her son becomes the father of Augustus. Then you have the father of Nero. Nero and Augustus are part of Arabic. They're part related to the Arabian, the Syrian Emesa dynasty and the Arabian royals that lead all the way back to Queen Shamsi, that go back to Assyria, that are intermarried cousins with Cyrus and Darius, and Cyrus is the Jewish Messiah. Rome is also always dealing with the Jewish exilarchs. Greece is also always dealing with the Jewish exilarchs, and they're fighting the Jews or being fought by the Jews and revolted against. So we have to look at that and then understand the evolutions of these religions and why they're so connected. Because people want to act like there's some, and there's a lot of people that go agnostic and they think there's some interconnected religious truth to Eurasia, right? So like there's some holy truth in Buddhism and Zoroastrianism and Jesus and Christianity that's the real truth, and they're lying about the specific dogma and specific doctrine. No, they're not. What I'm telling you is they're making it all up from a handful of families that have been slaving people for thousands of years, and they still are slaving through corporations now. They're slaving through rebel groups like they always have, okay? So the rebel group for Rome was those Arab royals. They're collecting taxes for people. They're running trade routes and being security proxies and middlemen between other outside forces, just like Byzantine Rome used the Khazars in the Pechenegs to be the buffer between them and the Germanic people. You understand? There's a constant association between these families and constant intermarrying that nobody has the fucking time to check, but then they want to all argue like it's all independent development. If you have the time to check, you can pull all of this, and none of this is an argument. But this has to be understood. Okay, because all these religious families, the people that control the Kaaba, like Samsi-Garamas and Queen Shamsi, they were running slaves to those temples. And then the families that control those stones, either in Petra, the rock city, where they had their own black stone also, like Elgabalus and like Turkey's Sibyl, those people that control those families are navigating back and forth between Arabia and Syria. How do you think Aramaean gets down to Arabs and then they get Arabic? Aramaean is from Syria region and Aramaean regions by Israel. That comes down to Arabia. That comes down to the conquest of the Ethiopians that gives them geese. That comes down to the conquest of the Ethiopians that makes them half Caucasians. You understand? And the same way Egypt got overtaken by that confederation of people. So now we're all in this world where these elites have now masked themselves in different religions now, and more contemporaneous ones. They're masking themselves in the modern religions, but they go back in their roots to these older religions, and those religions themselves were fake and man-made. All right? That's why they have so many similarities. Because the same handful of scribes, go read the Kalu and Kalutu paper. You have to understand it. You have to understand that they have 1,000-year, academia confesses this. There's 1,000-year monopolies on scriblehood systems and religious information that crosses 5 nations in a time where people are acting like people were barely dealing with each other. So 5 nations are getting the same information from a handful of family members from a scribal group, and then the Chaldeans themselves, who they say Abraham's a Chaldean or a Chaldee, a fucking Kasdim, He's a Chaldean, which is a scribal hood. It's not really a group of ethnic people. It's people that have a secret knowledge, right, of astrology and of writing. And then even in the Kaaba, they say there's a thing of a pagan statue of a Scythian-like divination with a group of arrows in Abraham's hand. Muhammad has that destroyed. But the families that control the Kaaba before are controlling the Kaaba after, the Quraysh clan. All right? And then the families they're even killing, and when they're fighting cousins of themselves for the elite control of that system, because it's a major pilgrimage site before and after Islam. They're making the money from that tourism and from all control of those routes before and after Islam. And then they have Davidic type Levitical families, or people that are hereditary gatekeepers of food, water, or provisions, the same way that the Jews do. Okay? And it's the same kind of shit happening with Islam and Judaism that's happening on the West. It's happening in the East with the Brahmins and their caste, right? You have the Kshatriya class, and you have the Brahmins, and one is the Levitical class, one is the warrior class. You have merchant classes. They have the food and water provisioning class, and the holy temple gatekeeper class of Islam. You have these things. They're mimicking each other because they're cousins. They are cousins. This kind of stupid shit does not come out of the blue. People that are domesticating and enslaving people know how to pass that on to their other elites, and they have the finances and the scribal networks and institutional knowledge to keep passing it from the Levant to the West and the Levant to the East. And the East gets to put their own spin on it. The West gets to put their own spin on it. And we're getting different versions of new religions, right? But the core families and the core power structures and the dowries getting passed down through female lines and marriages and the Y-DNA markers that we're getting from everywhere, all this stuff can be tracked now that could not be tracked before. So we don't need to read these 1800 racist historians bullshit and start saying that, oh, this one white Irish guy in 1857 said the Irish were the... Shut the fuck up. Go check the DNA markers of the people from a certain time. Check the DNA markers of these people from a different time. Look at the linguistic changes over time. Look at the transmission vectors of when they had communication. And you can get the entire story now with certainty. Okay? No more people having their own spin on why they're telling you the truth, or their own reason of giving you bullshit that's really propaganda just to empower their people. All secret Nordic, Aryan, special bullshit. We're Black Hebrew Israelite special bullshit. We're Chinese original people bullshit. We're Turkic. We always been kings of bullshit. We're Armenian, blah, blah, blah. Shut the fuck up. All y'all niggas are lying because we've all been conquered. And in the last 200 years, they gave us a remix of pseudo-nationalist bullshit through Helena Blavatsky, Mazzini, and Mazzani of the P2 Propaganda Lounge. And then they put all that together and gave it through the publication systems and education systems of people like the Rockefellers and other elite families and publishers and gatekeepers of printing presses. They gave us that recently. From India, China, everywhere that was colonized, which is 200 nations. There's 195 nations, 170 of them were colonized. So we all had that period where they're changing up and giving us our own egotistical bullshit for the next nationalist fucking era, like I told you. Now I'm freestyling this on pre-workout before the gym. So I might have made one or two mistakes, but my point is you can check all these things, and you need to before you keep pushing and spreading the stupid, retarded Tartaria shit or some nonsense ethnic racial superiority bullshit, because at the end of the day, we're all slaves, and COVID should have showed you. All these governments are working together to shut some shit down. All these governments can stop fighting each other, and in all the different languages and the communists, the capitalists, the fucking countries with monarchies, they all did the same thing and shut the fucking world down. You understand? For a bullshit code. So, no. There's no independent development. None of us are fighting against some big thing. And another big major thing is, what I need people to stop doing globally is this whole focus on now the United States and Israel, the bad guys. Who came before United States and Israel? Who put these white people in the United States? Who put those white people in Israel? Britain did. But you're just going to completely forget Britain's role in that, right? There are 120 nations they colonized. You think they just lost their power like that everywhere? The people that got the royal tracts of land that still to this day had that land came from Britain elite, Scottish elite, Irish elite, which themselves came from German elite, Prussian elite, Russian elite. This is an interconnected system of global tax slavery with a sugar coating on top of society, and the real world beneath it is a constant manipulation of markets, slave systems, trade routes, and it always has been, and even your religious books tell you this. You're just not reading it with the right lens. It's the most important thing I've ever said. if we don't get out of this religious ideology bullshit, and we don't start seeing that all these governments are corrupt, we are never going to save ourselves. And you can't put it all on the United States and Israel to try to save the people of Israel have to overthrow the Israeli government, and the people of the United States have to overthrow the United States government so the world can be free. What the fuck you think was happening in the rest of the world's history? All these other people, and even if it didn't, let's say it wasn't all a bunch of corrupt, interconnected networks, the coups that we have put through to the CIA and what the KGB has done and what the Chinese intel agencies have done and what the IDF has done, and Mossad and the MI6, all the coups and installations of leadership and power we put and Freemasons we put around the world, you think if you stop these two countries, anything changes? No, it doesn't. What this requires is every tax slave on earth to wake the fuck up. And you see what Sri Lanka did to their government and had them fucking evacuate. That has to happen globally. At one time. On one day, we can decide. It could be January 1st, 2027. All governments of the world will be disbanded. You understand what I'm saying? It's that simple. But it first takes about a year or two of everyone waking the fuck up. All it would take is 1% of society to understand this information, to pass it to another 2% of society, and then that thing will exponentially grow. And shared human learning hits a tipping point at 11%, where it starts to circulate and pick up so fast. We got to get to 11% of people with this kind of information. Not bullshit mysticism, not bullshit spirituality. We need to get to the point we are ready to pick up pitchforks, sharpen them, and fucking end this slave system. And then everybody that wants to own slaves or wants to hoard fucking food or gold or any other of that bullshit and not help society in general is a problem for society. We need to stop glorifying these rich elites and these special fucking religious lines. And we need to start saying, yo, what is the average thing that's best for the average kid around the world? Every child. And if you have some kind of disdain in your heart for some child of another race, you're beyond saving. You're part of the pitchfork crew that's going to receive the pitchforks. If you could look at a different race's child and think it's less than human, you're beyond all saving. But that's one thing, the purity of a child should be able to let you see that we're all interconnected and everything's got some good in them. Man, pre-workout.